What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2016 Nissan 370Z NISMO. Huge thanks to Alden for providing me with his awesome 370Z NISMO to review for you guys today. Also, huge thanks to Auto Tempest for sponsoring this review. Auto Tempest is a website where you can search all the top car for sale sites in one place, and I'll show you more about how that works whenever we get into the pricing of this car later on. So about the NISMO version of the 370Z, well, I think it's just a really good looking version. It just has so much more aggression than the standard 370Z of those darker headlamps there in the front. I love the more aggressive body kit you have here on the NISMO versions with the more aggressive front bumper, and I like the red accents that line the bumpers as well. Going down to the side skirts are more aggressive as well. Also along the sides here, I just love the hips you have on the 370Zs. They just really protrude out a little bit more than you would expect from an average sports car. Just gives it a really muscular but still stubby and just really athletic stance to it though. It's got a very cool look. The 370Zs are very unique in their styling. Going out to the back there, you can see another more aggressive rear bumper there, and again more of those red accents, and a nice little lip spoiler there on the back of the hatch as well. And overall, it's just a really nice look, especially here in this pearl white color. It's just really a nice contrast, and overall just a really great looking car. Right, for the interior of the 370Z NISMO, well, they really did a nice job in making it a lot more cool looking than a standard 370Z. But anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, that's one of the biggest differences here. You have these awesome Recaro seats that are just really sporty and just very aggressive seats in a very good way though. So I mean, torso bolstering is very aggressive, comes out very far, nice deep seats. You really sit down inside the seat here. It really kind of just envelops you, and it's really cool. And then as far as thigh support, it's also comes up pretty high here and really hugs you in place well. And I'm a little bit on the thinner side here, but even for someone thinner, it really hugs you in well. But it still is wide enough to give you some wiggle room too, so it's not going to be uncomfortable for larger body types or anything. But overall, they're actually pretty comfortable seats too, nice and soft. I have the nice Alcantara there that's red in the middle and then leather on the sides, and overall just really cool seats. Next to the steering wheel of the 370Z, which is again nicely differentiated over standard 370Z. So it's just got a really nice 9-3 grip like it always has had, a nice little 10-2 notches, and a pretty attractive wheel. But then for the NISMO version, they've added the Alcantara here on the sides of the steering wheel, and you have a nice little red stripe there on the top of it, and just gives it a nice sportier appearance. And yeah, but it's just another, it's a really great wheel. You have a few buttons on it here, and that's about it, but just a really cool wheel. Next to the gauges here, which are a little bit nicer for the NISMO as well, with the red outline you have there for the tachometer. Otherwise, they're the same 370Z gauges, though. You have a 180 mile per hour speedometer. I do like the tachometer front and center there, and it also has a gear position indicator there in the bottom of it. And then on the left-hand side, you have a digital engine coolant and fuel gauges, and a little, rudimentary readout there. Just give you a few basic trip information type of things in there. Nothing too fancy. Again, this is where the 370Z starts to show its age a little bit, but still all the basics, everything you need for sports car really. It doesn't have any of the fun toys of other sports cars, of more modern times here, but overall still very good. And continuing on with gauges though, there are three more, or I guess two more really. Up here you have the engine oil temp there, and then you also have a voltage meter, and then you have your clock there. So cool to have those additional auxiliary gauges right up top there. Coming down to the rest of the center of the dashboard here, you first have this area where you would normally have navigation if it were a nicer trim level or whatever, but for the NISMO here, this one just has this leather cover on it. Then you open that up, and it's a nice storage cubby here though. You can fit a good amount of stuff in there. A normal large size smartphone should fit in there pretty well, or whatever else you want. It's a pretty large space, and nice to have that. And then coming down, that's where you'll find your radio. Now these normally just come with a standard like CD player radio type thing, very old school and basic, but thankfully it's a double DIN unit size, so you can just pull out that old unit and put in something better, like the owner here has done. He's put in a Pioneer unit, which also has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so a huge upgrade there. The only thing I will say is in this area here, it's a little bit on the low side, but you do sit low in this vehicle, so it helps it a little bit. But it would be nice to have it up in this higher cubby area, but that it's probably possible. It just might take a little more work to get it up there instead, but it's still nice to have down here. And and within easy reach and all that. And anyway, so nice that that's at least easily swappable if you want to upgrade it to a more modern head unit here. And then you have your 3 basic climate control knobs here, which are small and compact, but have a nice feel to them actually. And so overall, no complaints there at all. And then otherwise, you just have a little button there for S mode, so the sport mode, I think, which says the auto rev matching. And then you have the shifter, which is really nicely placed here for sporty driving. And that's basically it. Coming back, he also has added a USB jack in here. That you usually would just have, I think, 3 blank spaces there. It's kind of funny. But yeah, so that's basically it as far as that. And then going on to the storage space in the 370Z, it's actually quite good, except for one thing. But anyway, the doors here, you have a small map pocket, which does have a bottle holder as well, though, which is good to have that. Like I said, you have that center cubby up top here. And then coming back, you only have 1 cup holder. That's the only thing that's a downside about this interior, is 1 cup holder. That's it. I mean, you do have the bottle holders, but if you want to carry open drinks, you can only carry 1, and that's it in here. And then anyway, coming back, you have the center armrest, which is very softly padded and feels pretty nice. Not the highest quality of material, but anyway, it's soft and good for resting your elbow on. And anyway, you open that up, and then you have a fairly deep little center cubby. It's got a decent amount of storage. As you can see here, you can fit some cables in there, sunglasses, wallet, keys, all that kind of stuff, but nothing super large. Maybe a smartphone might be a bit of a squeeze if it's a larger one. But anyway, in there you also have an auxiliary jack, a USB jack, and a power outlet. So nice to have all of those in there. But that's not all. Although the 370Z does not have a back seat, you do have some additional little cubbies here behind each of the seats, and there's even an additional little spot back here where you can fit in a couple of, like he has microfiber cloths there. And so overall, all things considered, it's really good for a small sports car. Trunk space in the 370Z is an interesting case. So it's a hatchback, which is very good, which means you have all the versatility. It's very easy to load things that are of a large size. But then, it's just very shallow, and it's got, the rear strut towers or whatever, they're kind of in the way. So it blocks it a little bit, and also just the lack of depth kind of limits you a bit, although you still do have the hatch. But I think you could still probably squeeze, 2 suitcases in there fairly easily, or at least certainly large duffel bags, things like that will fit with ease. Not quite as usable as something like a Corvette hatch area, where that's nice and square and wide and fairly deep. This is a lot less usable than something like that, but still a good amount of space nonetheless, and still probably a little larger than your average sports cars usually have. And so overall, very usable. Again, for a small sports car of this size, I think it's pretty good. All right, so starting to go for a drive. The 370Z NISMO has the nice Nissan key, which does have a Z on it, so a little unique there, but otherwise a standard key. But of course, it's keyless entry and push button start here. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it roars to life. So as you might be able to hear, this one also has a muffler delete, so it's gonna sound really nice and throaty. Unfortunately, it's too cold for a GoPro to stick on that back bumper, so you won't get any outside sounds of it, but from the inside here, you'll hear it. It sounds really sweet. All right, so setting off in the 370Z NISMO, well, a couple of things you notice right off the bat. First is this clutch is a little bit on the heavy side and can be a little tricky to get used to right off the bat. Other things to note are the visibility in the 370Z is a little limited, but not too bad. You have a pretty good view forward. The hood drops down nicely, so it's easy to see out of. View out of the sides is fairly good, but you do have a kind of a little bit of a blind spot over your shoulder there. But the owners actually installed convex mirrors, which help with your visibility as well, and so that, I think that goes a long way into giving you a better side view. And the view out of the back is fairly limited with its little slender rear hatch view there, but it is actually quite wide, so you can see everything around the sides of the back there. It's just not a very wide opening. Alrighty, so let's turn down onto this back road here. I'll put traction control off, see how it does. Here we go. Up, it goes really well too. So the NISMO version of the 370Z has 350 horsepower, about 279 pound-feet of torque from this glorious 3.7 liter, gotta do the tunnel, 3.7 liter V6 engine. And these things will do 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds from the factory. And so overall, it's a pretty good amount of power. Again, in these days we're living where there's such high horsepower numbers, it might not sound very impressive, but it's definitely enough power to have fun with. And now this one is actually running 285 wide rear tires and 245s in the front. But since you have 285s in the back for 350 horsepower, I mean, there is no wheel spin, no drama. That's one thing with the standard 370Z, they were a little more tail happy, and we'll have to see once we're on some back roads if this is the same way. But at least in a straight line, this thing really puts down the power well. Muffler delete, it just I love these Nissan Z motors. They just are really a special sound. It was really unique over a standard V6 in my opinion. And you have the rev match downshifts too, which is Nissan was one of the first to do this auto rev matching thing, so I'm not even flipping the throttle at all. That's just the engine doing it all on its own. Even first gear is a perfect rev match, which is really hard for most people to even do on their own. So I mean, yeah, it's really responsive and quick with those downshifts. This shifter, by the way, while we're using it, is really nice and notchy. It has a good amount of feel to it. It's a little more raw, where you can really feel every little aspect of the gate whenever you're going into gear. But it's got a really nice feel to it. It's not too rubbery. It's a nice mechanical feel. Like I said, it's a nice distance from you as well. It's very nicely placed. One thing that I do remember from my previous 370Z review that I'm encountering a little bit more again here in this one is the lack of sound deadening that there is. You get a little more road noise in 370Zs than I feel like you do in a lot of other sports cars, where you hear the tires, you hear the road, and it's just something I'll have to continue to drive a little longer, but I don't know if that's something they improved at all. This is a 2016 model year. The last one I drove was a 2013, but just something to note that especially like last time I was driving when it was a rainy day and you could hear all the puddles and everything going on the road. So it's a very communicative experience. I feel like the 370Z, especially these days, where everything is so refined and a little more disconnected, this still is a very raw feel to it, and a little bit old school these days, since it's basically still largely unchanged from 2009. Of course, the Nismo's got a lot of nice upgrades to it, and it's heavily improved, but it's still the same bones, and it just gives this a very raw feeling. That, like I said, compared to something like, I don't know, a V6 Mustang or something, where it'd be way more disconnected than this is. This is just really analog. It just feels great to drive around in. Alright, so now we're on a back road here, and this thing really is nice and flat. It's really, especially with these, this wide tires, like I said, these 245s and 285s in the back, it really feels planted. I'm not pushing it by any means here, but it does feel very stout, and a little more composed than what I remember, in the 370Zs that I drove a couple of years ago. Other things to note here about the 370Z NISMO are the steering is really nice feeling. I think it's still, obviously a hydraulic unit. It just has a really direct feel. It's like the perfect kind of weight. It's not too heavy, but not too light. It's just right. It feels really nice and just direct and natural feeling. Throttle response is also razor sharp. Again, one of the wonderful things about this slightly more old school setup of a naturally aspirated normal V6. There's no kind of disconnect. There's no turbos to wait for. There's no gimmicky stuff going on. It's just you put your foot down and immediately it starts responding as soon as you tip in. Got a little bit unsettled there. So these roads, as you can see, are very undulating. I go up and down, and got some really nice corners to them here. But this thing's doing pretty good though. But I can tell that it's a little lively, just like how the 370Zs have always been. It feels really, really nice. It's a lot of fun. But another thing to note here, the brakes in the 370Z feel really nice and meaty. You do have a little bit of travel before you start getting into the meat of it, maybe 1/3 of the way down, and then it starts responding. But once you get into them though, they are very nice feeling brakes, and still a lot of confidence. Those rev match downshifts just never get old. I love that. It does it way better than I ever could. Another acceleration. Got a little wheel spin that time, which is impressive. Again, for the amount of numbers we have here, the power of this thing, for it to be spinning 285s is impressive. So yeah, it's a little bit of a cooler day, but still very, very impressive. Like I said, these cars, they feel faster than the numbers might suggest. You might look at the spec sheet and say, oh, that doesn't seem very impressive. But whenever you're actually out driving one of these things, I mean, they're fairly lightweight. They're only 3,400 pounds. And it's just a shorter wheelbase. It's just very FRS 86 and been like, well, that was fun, but I wish it had more power, this is what you need to check out, because you got way more power, you got a great, glorious V6, and you do have some more weight. I mean, obviously this is about 500 pounds or so heavier than a BRZ or something like that, but you know, if you trade a little bit of that weight, you get a lot more power, and you still get a very planted, awesome handling experience. And honestly, I think the steering in this is even better than what you get in stuff like the BRZ. So there's certainly some upsides in addition to just the additional power too. But I just love taking this thing around corners, just point and shoot, and but it keeps you on your toes still too. You know, like I said, since it is rear-wheel drive, it's not like all these other all-wheel drive vehicles these days that just figure it all out for you. You still can dance it around and, you know, kind of balance, you know, the car through the corners with the gas pedal and stuff. It just feels really, really good. Another thing to note here, now these roads are getting a little bit rougher, but it's not really a rough ride. I'm really impressed. You know, the Nismo, of course, has much more aggressive suspension setup, so you have a lot less lean. You know, like in a standard 370Z, you're rolling around a lot more. You know, there's a lot more body motions, which exaggerates the less planted feel you have in a standard 370. And they've gotten rid of all of that. They've made it way more direct, way more precise, but you're not giving up a lot of ride comfort. I really don't see a huge difference in ride quality over a standard 370. Again, it's been a few years, but personally, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's much stiffer or anything like that. And so, you know, I think you can totally still daily drive one of these things. It's not like it's only a track special or something, although I'm sure it would do very well on a track. But it's still, even on rough roads right now, I mean, I'm getting a little bit of, you know, vibration and stuff, but it is so muted. But really, this is a car, it's really, I think, especially great for those who have great back roads. If you live in a place where you have windy roads, I think that's where the 370Z really comes alive, because otherwise, you know, for the price, if you want more straight line speed, there's other options out there with higher horsepower numbers for roughly the same money. But this does a good combination. It straddles a nice middle ground between the muscle cars that all handle very well themselves, but, you know, this has less horsepower, but a more direct, a lighter, sharper feeling than those do. But then it's not so underpowered like the BRZ and FRS. So it's a very nice middle ground that I don't think there's really any other vehicles these days that fill this gap. You know, there used to be like the Genesis Coupes. Those are gone. This still has that analog, connected feeling that just, you're the driving experience. You're the one doing it all. There's not a million drive modes other than the Rev Match Township. You know, you're doing everything. It feels like you're part of the experience instead of just along for the ride like a lot of these other cars these days. So it's a really fun thing to drive around in. And yeah, it's a shame. The last thing to really mention here is, you know, the price of these things. I think especially the Nismo, they may start to appreciate eventually. So if it's something you consider, you know, I definitely wouldn't wait around, because, you know, it doesn't look like there's any kind of Z successor on the horizon, at least not anytime soon. And so, you know, if you want one of these Zs, I think, you know, there's no better time than the present to enjoy them. I also wanted to add that while new pricing for 370Z Nismos is kind of steep, around $45,000, the used market is really where you'll find the best value and where this makes the most sense to pick one of these up. So let's check on Auto Tempest. Like I mentioned earlier, Auto Tempest searches all the major sites for cars, eBay, you know, Auto Trader, Cars.com, and a few others as well. They can even compare results from all of Craigslist, and all of this ensures you don't miss any cars so that you have the best selection, the best price, and do it all far easier than manually checking multiple sites yourself. So whenever we search for the 370Z Nismo, now, you know, they also were just as powerful back in 2009 when the Nismo version was revealed. And so if you don't mind the older looks, you can pick up one of those for right around $20,000, even with pretty low miles, which is, you know, pretty good value there for 350 horsepower. Once again, if you do want the updated newer looks, we can search for 2016s here just by refining the search. And then we'll see that, you know, those are right around $30,000, which is still pretty good value for the unique niche that this vehicle occupies. And I think, you know, it's still, that makes it a lot more competitive at $30,000 than it does at $45,000. And so pretty cool. Like I said, you know, with Auto Tempest here, you can see all the results and, you know, check out, you know, pricing for yourself. But yeah, and then just back on the main road here cruising, it's a really nice car if you do want to just take it easy and cruise in. Like I said, the ride is really quite smooth, a lot smoother than you were probably expecting, honestly. improved it in every way, and I can't see any kind of downside to the Nismo version at all. I think it just adds more goodness, more power, better looks. There's just no reason to not go for the Nismo outside of, you know, it being a little more expensive than a regular 370. And I also want to add too, one last thing before I go here, is the road noise does seem less prevalent than it was in the standard 370Z that I reviewed a couple years ago. So I don't know if that's a combination of this exhaust being louder, so I just don't hear it for that reason, or if maybe they have actually improved the sound deadening and refinement in them over the course of, you know, a few model years. But either way, you know, it's really, like I said, very, very impressive, and overall just an absolute blast. So huge thanks once again to Alden for allowing me to review his 370Z here, Nismo, for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts about these in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.